This and the next 5 segments represent a very special series, especially for SMEs, that is, for the sake of clarity, small and medium-sized enterprises, since SME also doubles as an acronym for subject matter expert. Small and medium-sized enterprises have generally been considered to be at multiple forms of disadvantage when tendering for big-ticket government contracts, particularly in the civil infrastructure space. Back in the day, marketing academics referred to this as, quote-unquote, the IBM factor, which was a reference to the broader sentiment that nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. In turn, that was a reference to the usually accurate observation that going with the big, well-entrenched names was simply a case of personal career insurance for management and procurement execs. To a still very significant degree, arguably, that mindset remains in place. Of course, it's politically incorrect of me to say so, but it is true, and that's what the bid commando philosophy is all about, reality and results. So I've been involved in the bidding world since 2005, and that is in an exclusive manner. Before that, I was in general marketing and various other strings to my bow. In that 15 years, I've worked with, at a rough stab, at a proportion, I'd say about 25% to 30% SMEs, with obviously the remaining and lion's share of my client base as corporates. So I've seen both ends of town, and up close and personal. And I've made observations and formed conclusions that have remained consistent across that entire decade and a half. And many of those conclusions don't look like changing anytime soon. By the way, I've capitalised greatly on those observations to help some smaller players that didn't even register on the tier scale, that is tier 1, tier 2, the big end of town or any other end of town, to take out the biggest names in their industries in bids that were in fact the biggest game in town at the time. And just so you know I'm not making that up, you can see their comments and testimonials in the client's debrief section of this website. In fact, these David versus Goliath challenges are arguably my favourite form of bid. So, before we head out, I want to cover off something that overarches this entire series, and that is commercial reality and discernment. So, notwithstanding the theme of this series, please don't let bravado cloud your judgment. As part of your assessment as to whether you're going to go for a bid, make sure you actually do have the smarts, the kit, and also, of course, the resources to competently and profitably deliver the project, do the job, or service the contract. And that's an assessment any competent bidder should begin months, if not many months, in advance of the tender documentation being released. And no, I know you don't yet know what the evaluation criteria will be, but you can build a reasonable picture of what they are likely to be and gain a reasonable degree of confidence that you will meet these or not. But for the purposes of the recording, let's assume you've completed a critical, comprehensive go or no-go assessment, and that you've paid very careful attention to the competition you're likely to be up against, and that you're well positioned, you're well qualified, and you're sufficiently resourced to deliver the project, contract, product, or whatever the subject of the tender is. And by the way, as with almost every segment book or product I produce, I'm approaching this from the perspective of non-price criteria. That is, I'm working to get you over the line through your skills, your smarts, and your strategy, and not by compromising your profitability. So I'm going to break the topic down across this series into the same 5 subtopic areas that represent the names of the 5 modules in my Beating the Big Boys at Bids training and field guide series, which, by the way, is available for your immediate purchase on this website. So, in today's segment, let's dive into capitalising on an SME's natural advantages. The natural SME advantage that's always stood out for me most of all is that, and there's going to be some political incorrectness here, but frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Employees in most corporations are, in my humble opinion, often too far removed from being able to make the connection between the success of their organisation, that is their employer organisation, and their own personal pay packets. And the brand of commitment they give to a bid, it might certainly be worthy, yes, but by the same token, it often isn't anywhere near the very personal degree of dedication that can be seen in the staff of many smaller companies. Now again, I know there'll be listeners from larger organisations that take grave exception to that statement, and if they are an exception to it, then so they should. But you get the point I'm making. The BDs and other personnel of smaller organisations usually have a closer relationship with those at the top of the company, and as a result, they have a greater feeling of personal investment, like their own future is more closely tied to the outcome of a big bid. And yes, I know that the big boys have the funds for training courses, more sophisticated CRM, specialist in-house writers and production teams, and that others hire outside help like facilitators and copywriters, but often, and I will tell you now, with greatly mixed results. Because, and no one on either side of the equation likes to admit this, but there's simply no substitute for the degree of dedication and personal investment that the organisation's own personnel puts into a bid. That is, if they're capable, genuinely knowledgeable, coachable, and motivated. Secondly, there's flexibility. If a bid has done its homework early and done it well, its frontline operatives will have brought key insights back to base, and those insights might indicate a chasm between the bidder and the buying organisation in any number of areas. But if we're talking about a switched-on, nimble bidder, those issues shouldn't be insurmountable. And surmounting them can pay dividends not only in the bidding process itself, but also in the level and quality of service that can be convincingly put forward as part of the actual offer. So for a moment, still on the note of flexibility and nimbleness, smaller operators are more agile. There are fewer layers of decision making. Things get done quicker, problems get solved faster, communication goes up the chain in a less diluted manner. And a smart bid strategist and a talented writer will find a way to demonstrate that the customer or client organisation won't be dealing with 17 levels of bureaucracy, layers of paperwork, and 3 months lag time every time they need something done in a slightly different way, or if some part of the arrangement's broken and needs attention. For many clients, if you can demonstrate that you're a well-calculated risk and not simply a wild card, the client may well consider that small and manageable degree of risk worth taking in order to avoid the pain of that sort of slow-moving bureaucracy, which can be especially painful if the big players are part of international corporations. And I'm thinking by way of an ideal example of smaller players in the facilities management space, versus the monolithic global beasts that dominate the FM industry. Big ships with no hope of cultural or procedural influence by any but the biggest and most important clients. Thirdly, and then I'll leave it at that for this segment, in the bid process itself, there are fewer links in the chain for critical communications and insights to have to make their way through, getting diluted, convoluted, or lost in the process. A big bidder might have a dedicated business development operative as the organisation's frontline representative, sure, but the information he or she channels back into the grid in a corporate will generally end up being dispersed around a variety of parties and job descriptions and through multiple communications channels. By contrast, the frontline operatives of a smaller organisation usually inject that information far more directly into the bid's knowledge base. And the trick is not to lose that advantage, but instead to capitalise on it by making sure you've got your production processes and your strategy smarts optimised. Well, that's enough for one segment. If that's whet your appetite, that whole line of tuition is added greatly to and expanded all the way out in Module 1 of the Beating the Big Boys at Bids training manual set, which of course is available right here on this website for instant download and putting into immediate action in your enterprise.